Lindsey and I met for a brief 3.5 minutes, and which is kind of good because the whole idea is for myself and Lindsey to have a conversation about her company and her being here in Gainesville and exposing that great ecosystem that we constantly talk about, some of the high moments, low moments of the creation of your company, and some of the struggles that a lot of people in this room are going through. But through your tenacity and efforts, you've risen to the top, and it is great to have a female entrepreneur on board here tonight. So what I'd like to do, Lindsey, is learn a little bit about where you're from, your family, and those kinds of things. You might give us a 3 to 5 minute kind of opening about who you really are, and then we'll dive into your company a little bit.
Okay. Don't normally get asked about all that. I know you warned me, but it's still a different topic. I was raised in Florida, Vero Beach, Florida, so East Coast, coastal town there. Yeah, I'm not a super sentimental person, so kind of who I am has always been very much focused on going and doing cool things and wanting to leave, much to the chagrin of my family around there. Graduated high school, I was like, I'm out, guys, and I came back to Florida, obviously, but always really wanted to kind of extend that beyond and go have cool experiences and make cool things or do something with lots of external impact, which has just always been my mindset. So, I mean, yeah, went through, never really sure what to talk about for this stuff, went through gifted classes, did all that stuff, graduated valedictorian because I was a nerd who dual enrolled in college classes out of curiosity and summers and nights, and went off to college and did that, and that was kind of my background. I had my undergrad in psychology with a teacher licensure, and so that was a really great experience for me. Showed up at a school in Tennessee where I was doing my student teaching and kicked the teacher out because he didn't really know a lot about psychology, and just taught the class the whole semester, and just got the key and did that, and came down and started a grad program in education here in Gainesville, which is how I ended up back in Gainesville at the University of Florida and started working on my PhD in education there. And so have always just been very excited to go and explore things and kind of get started out in the world, but grad school definitely delays that.
So when did you come to Gainesville? What year?
2008.
Okay, 2008, so about 10 years ago.
How long it's been.
Okay, and so you graduated with an advanced degree from UF?
I am a PhD dropout, ABD,
okay.
On the dissertation. I do have my master's there, but
no worries.
Didn't quite finish that dissertation. Yeah, maybe at some point if they still let me.
No, that's wonderful, and I think when we find out about your company, you've certainly carved out a fantastic path for yourself. So, so you came to Gainesville, and so let's just put it like it is. You dropped out. What year was that?
Like 8 years in. I actually had a photography small business. Started that during undergrad, my last year of undergrad, and I think that was my first exposure to just this idea that you could go and just make a company and do something. And when I had first graduated from high school, I mean, that was in 2004, so that was the year Facebook was founded. And I didn't really know a lot about what you could do with coding. And I was great at computers and math, but in my mind, that was just IT work, and I found that really boring, and I didn't want to go do that, so I went to college for psychology, because of course that has way more applications than coding, which I think is a great benefit of just a general amount of awareness now about entrepreneurship, social impact, and what you can really do with that, which, if things hadn't turned out how they were, I would greatly regret. But, so, went and did that, and then I don't remember where the original point of this question was, or where we were going.
Well, so before we kind of dive into your company and so forth, I want to know more about how many entrepreneurs were you exposed to in your family?
Nobody, although I helped my mother start her business.
Okay. Right,
because I had a photographer. This is where it started. So okay. I started a photography business, which taught me the basics. I think I got to make mistakes at a smaller scale there, because it was, a service business. I was one of the top photographers in Gainesville during grad school, which is why it also took me forever, because right. I was pretending that I didn't have a big business to my professors and pretending that I wasn't really involved in school to my clients, and just doing both for many years until I phased that out to start Immersed Games and start working on the company. And it takes a lot of planning when you're a wedding photographer right. a couple years in advance to stop accepting people and phase that out. And so when I was actually phasing out my first business. My mother was trying to start a business, and she's hopefully not watching this, was being a little slow about it, and wanting to, you know, design the perfect website, and just kept tweaking and did that, and I got really frustrated and was like, just write up all your content and give it to me. And I just stayed up and popped it all out in one night and was like, you have no excuse, just start it now and start working on the business and stop fiddling around with a logo and a website and just get going. And she had some life circumstances that shifted, and she went there. And
right.
So
was
while my mother's an entrepreneur, I was pressed.
Okay, so when was that? I mean, was that during your college days, your high school days, or?
No, that was when I was in grad school.
In grad school,
yeah.
okay.
No.
All right.
I'd already started my business and was able to just kind of help her with what I know and everything, which has been fun to talk back and forth. And I've kind of, you know, scaled before her, and kind of some of those shared experiences of her getting too busy, and as a service business kind of getting capped on what she can do, and how do you expand. For
right.
Christmas one year, I bought her, Eva Del Rio is a great HR person in town. She has an HR book on how do you get contractors and manage them. And so that was like my mother's Christmas present one year from me, was an HR book on expanding your business with contractors, since that was really her limitation. So that's been fun, but I don't come from that background, and I didn't really know it existed.
Yeah, I worked with Eva Del Rio at New York Times Company.
Okay,
kind of a small
nice.
world. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we move on to your company, I do want to remind especially the new folks, so we're going to have about 45 minutes of interview, and then we'll have about 10 or 15 minutes of questions. So if there's something that you're thinking about during the conversation, just hold it till the end, and we'll go over it from then, okay? So Immersed out of what was your thought process in starting your company?
Yeah, so as you know, I was working on a PhD in education, and I really wanted to study educational games. At first, I thought that I wanted to be a professor and study educational games and their really great impact. I got really inspired by that one day, actually, while playing World of Warcraft, and just realizing the absolutely absurd amount of information that I knew from playing this game, and that my husband knew, and we just, I mean, undergrad, I spent literally 1/3 of my time playing World of Warcraft, you know, between that, sleeping, working, and going to college. So that's a pretty interesting experience. And so when I realized how much I had learned through playing this game, and I really wanted to apply that within just researching educational games and the promise that they could have, but then when I sat down just from an academic educator perspective, I saw a lot of gaps in the market. The educational games that are out there are generally very fragmented, kind of one-off games that have maybe 15 minutes, a couple hours of content, and that's it, and you move on. They're pretty shallow. They don't generally have a lot of problem solving and depth to them. And so just from the educator's perspective, I was just totally crushed and disappointed that I couldn't go study these, and that I just wasn't happy with what was out there. And, you know, because that, I guess, entrepreneurial mindset had started to develop from having a small business and everything, it just seemed very obvious that I could just go make it myself and go do that. At the same time, I also decided that academia was terrible and not something I wanted to be a part of. Sorry, UF. For me, it just moves really slow compared to the rate that I liked moving at, and wasn't really a very good fit for me. Got in trouble at my department a couple times for like being too direct with people and forward and stuff, and it was not going awesome. So I was like, well, private sector is really the only place I can go, because they like those things in the private sector, I hear. Right. Not that I knew yet. And right. So decided to start a company.
What year was that?
That was that's a great question. That was probably 2012 to 2013 that I decided I wanted to definitely start it, but I wanted to keep, you know, finishing my program, and I had no skill set, and I needed to find co-founders and start thinking about this. And so I probably just spent a year reading everything on the internet, to the point that now it's like I don't really like reading very much business blogs. It's all the same advice over and over after you've spent like a year reading everything you can find. Although in Silicon Valley, I was told to never admit that I learned everything on the internet. I just have to pretend I learned it all through osmosis, or was naturally born with it, or I sound like a noob and get judged. So I can only say that here. Right. That's how I just learned tons of stuff. Started looking for co-founders.
And through the web.
It's funny. You just not bored.
So I think that's a valid point, though. I think a lot of people in the room are trying to figure out, you know, as we have these talks, there are some people I ask, who inspires you, and who well, where was the turning point and these kinds of things in their lives, and they're like, there wasn't, I just did it kind of thing, you know. And some people are like, okay, I want the textbook that tells me how to get from point A to point B.
Right.
And, you know, is that the way it is? A lot of people want to know, is it just, are you just born with it, or can you just do it because you can find a way, you know? And where do you stumble upon a product, or is it people driven, you know, and that kind of thing. So let's dive into that a little bit. You did kind of, you know, show your hand that really and truly it's more about executing than anything else. And if you read the stuff long enough, it does kind of regurgitate and so forth.
Yeah.
So you start in 2012. How many employees are you at now? 12 employees, okay, that's awesome. That's great. 12 families, I like to think, you know, that you're supporting and so forth. They're supporting themselves, of course. So it started with you and who in 2012?
Just me at first. I mean, as I said, I was still finishing up my PhD program, and so I came home and told my husband that I was going to start a game studio, and he said, that's great, awesome, I'm going to keep working at Apple, and you do your thing. But after talking about it excitedly and making plans for, you know, 6 months, he was like, okay, I think I'll do this with you. You know, he had a different skill set, business and people and sales from my education background, and then we started recruiting, which was definitely challenging. You know, I knew that I could learn coding and go out and do that if I wanted, but I'm a domain expert in education, and I have a different skill set that I need to spend all of my time doing. And so it seemed to me that if I taught myself coding, 6 months later I'd never code again, and that would have been kind of a waste of time. I needed a full-time tech person who really got tech and games. And so we actually joined a club on campus that Augie Lai told us about, some previous club. We found an iteration it was called like IDEA, where a bunch of programmers are sitting around making games. Ended up like getting them to agree to rebrand it to the Game Makers Guild, put posters everywhere, recruited, made it to about 30 people, and then recruited people out of that to start our company with us, largely. So met somebody else at a career job fair hosted by Starter Space a long time ago.
Now, hold on. Are you saying you created the idea of bringing these people together, then to search for talent out of it?
We were having trouble finding a tech co-founder, and
well, there's a valuable lesson there.
Yeah.
I mean, it truly is a valuable lesson if you think about it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you have to find that solution on your own and create kind of that opportunity for those to find you as a company.
And like, I'm just thinking, much like when you do early stage customer marketing, like, okay, I need a tech co-founder who loves building stuff and is going to build a video game and has a tech background to do that. How do I find that person? Well, they're going to be someone who's going to be at a club building video games. And so you know, Augie recommended this to me, and we jumped in there, but it was a handful of people and nobody was really the right fit yet. And so it was like, well, this is a great way to get more people. And we actually didn't have a co-founder after that. We had some people that we thought were pretty good, and I was really impatient about not getting started and not building anything because I didn't have a tech person. And we had some code from some people's senior project that they like set up the framework for the game. And so we just decided to design an internship program. And so put posters all over campus again for an internship program, and just started recruiting people. And there's one person who, Sam is now our tech co-founder, who I had met with this Game Makers Guild and seemed really, really sharp, like he might be a right fit. So I like messaged him, found out about his career goals, and just like, oh, I just happen to have an internships position that's exactly that. You can totally be a producer and lead your own team. You know, I'm just making it all up. And so convinced him to come be an intern. And then he got there and I was like, here's the code we have. I have no idea how to even look at it. And he was like, this is all crap and I have to start from scratch. And I was like, okay. And so he started from scratch. This was January 2014. He started from scratch and built our prototype in like 3 months. So we took to the One Spark Festival in Jacksonville and got tons of feedback and kids coming back multiple days in a row loving it. And then we were like, hey, do you want to be a co-founder? And so that was like, great, we have a team now finally with kind of other people. We'd also recruited on the art and creative side. So, I mean, deciding I wanted to do it to, you know, getting my full co-founding team is like 2 years, you know, of a process because I was taking it slow. I was still working on my PhD and I thought I was going to finish it and going through that and finding the right people and learning a lot in that cycle. So I really consider January 2014 to be like when the company really started, because that's when we started building things.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when were you in Silicon Valley? You were.
Yeah, so we went out to Silicon Valley last year. We did the Intel Education Accelerator there, and so we were there from August to December or so last year.
Did you take your whole team, or did some of them stay here, or how'd that work?
Mainly just the co-founders, and then we cycled people out. We had, a tutu in Redwood City, which of course costs $3,500 a month, and poured 4 beds in there and kind of cycled people in and out of that so that people could come out there and get the Kool-Aid of Silicon Valley, which is a lovely experience for a short period of time.
I understand.
Yeah.
So let's go back. So you're starting out, and so you have the co-founder and yourself, and how many others at this point?
Our co-founding team has kind of shifted a few times, which I probably won't get into all of that. But at this point, I mean, in the internship program, just a lot of people were interested in building games. So we ended up with we started with an internship program of 15 people right off the bat, which was really awkward, just be like, okay. And we just had weekly meetings over at the SCAD, run by Santa Fe. Yeah. I just cooked food every week and brought it in and was like, look, we have food and you guys are doing work, awesome. And so we just very quickly learned how to manage a decent sized team, just part-time, nights and weekends, building things, so. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the critical things for young companies is funding.
Yes.
So let's talk about funding for a minute, because that's the reason I was trying to set the stage for when you started in 12-ish, 13-ish, you really launched in 14.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me about how you convinced your husband, right?
Yeah.
Partly. How have you funded it along the way?
Well, we had no money, so we were still in college and everything. Right. So the first thing we did was a Kickstarter campaign, and that was in the summer of 2014. So after we did the prototype and tested it with a bunch of students, got great feedback, and collected email lists that way at the One Spark Festival, we ran a Kickstarter and raised $50,000 that summer. And so that enabled us to get 2 people on salary. I wasn't getting paid yet. I was working on my PhD dissertation research while building a company. So, Ryan, my husband, went back to school to kind of fund himself while we built the company as well, so that we could put the resources into development that we needed. And so we had 2 full-time people working in development at that point from the Kickstarter. And then the next year we raised a little, $25K from friends and family to help maintain those salaries, and then raised a full angel round later that year in 2015. So by July 1st, 2015 was our close date on 400,000 angel round, based in Gainesville.
And how did you find that experience? Because I mean, a lot of people, one of the great frustrations of Gainesville startups is the VC world and the angel funds and different avenues, friends and families and so forth. So was 400 enough?
You always could use more. And I definitely should have done the matching funds up front that the state of Florida will do if you license a tech, but I didn't really have a tech I needed, and I didn't do that, but that would have been very helpful. It always takes longer, and it always costs more than you think it's going to take and you think it's going to cost, and I feel like I've been doing this forever at this point. But when I look around at my friends building their web-based products, which game development it takes a long time to begin with, I feel like we're on similar trajectories. It's just people's overnight success that you read about online is actually 5-year success. It just feels that way to you because you never heard of them, but everything takes a long time. So in terms of fundraising, I am pretty terrible at it, quite frankly. That is not a great skill set that I have, and I definitely had regrets that at that point in the company's history, we got to the point where I just had not very many options. I got really lucky, meeting an angel through the UF Big Idea competition who he reached out, I didn't reach out, friended me on Facebook and started talking with me, and we went to lunch, and I was like, well, I'm going to take contract work on because we're about to be out of money in the company, and stuff, so I'll just do some contract work for us for the time being, we'll do it later, and was like, no, I can lead this, and so I definitely attribute that, and I know that's a lot of entrepreneurship is just the luck and the coincidence of did you meet the right person at the right time, and were you prepared, right, where opportunity meets preparation, but I should have had more than, one option, and actually the right before we went in and hand shook, closed that deal for funding, the people that we were finalists for contract work called and said, we gave it to the other people. So, that was literally my only option left at that point, when I walked in that room, which I think is not a great call as a CEO, but more common than I guess we realize, you know, when you kind of get down to the wire like that.
So most all the conversations we've had before on Startup Talks, no one has gotten as much as they wanted.
Yeah.
So I've never really asked them, so I'm going to say this is a random question, but do you sense that people are more, the tenacity and the eagerness to prove a concept is out there if you have some struggles on the funding side in general? I know that's kind of a crazy question, but
I'm not sure. I
mean, let's just put yourself in it. Do you feel like okay, I'm going to prove, so you have a major funder, right? So now you really have to prove to the world that this is going to be viable.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that would be a lot that your team works harder because of that? Do you think your drive is harder, or if you just said, I gave you a blank checkbook and said, just go make it happen?
I mean, I think there's something to be said about experimenting lean. Maybe not as lean as my poor team's paychecks are right now, right. But at least somewhat lean. It's definitely, the persistence has definitely rung with some people when, you know, I talk to them, they're like, oh, you guys are still doing this, that's awesome, you know, I mean, a lot of startups don't last for a year, it's been a couple years now, we've built a lot, we built it on very little money. I mean, when I was talking with one VC in Silicon Valley, and she said, your burn rate for the size of your team is lower than some companies we have in Mexico.
Right.
And I was like, please don't tell my team that, you know. But I mean, that is a great benefit of Gainesville, is that you can actually do that, you know. And I mean, we're all living okay.
Right.
At least they might not agree. Hopefully no one's watching the stream, my goodness. But they might not agree. But I know at least one person was putting money into savings because she cooked a lot on our salaries. But you know, it is possible, and she was super impressed with just like the execution chops. I talked with someone else, the first meeting I had, who had been the CEO of Sega and Mattel and a bunch of companies, and I told him what we built on how much money, and he was like, holy crap, I failed to do something like that in the 80s on $3 million, you know. Right. Granted, it's a little easier to build now, but I was like, yeah, totally, we're so great that, you know. Right. So I mean, there's something of that, but I think there's also something of the fact that, like, you know, I've been doing this for a while and we haven't hit gold yet. We haven't skyrocketed on the hockey stick yet, because finding that niche and getting the product ready, especially in games, just takes a long time. I mean, some games take a decade to build that are really high quality, and, you know, we're building it as iteratively and lean as we can, but it just takes time, and those cycles take time. And so I think sometimes also people's perceptions are like, man, you're how many years in now? So I think there's a little bit of both.
Is the company sustainable?
No.
Or you're looking for funding?
Yes.
Looking for more funding?
We are not at break even,
okay.
No.
All right. Fair enough. So let's, I want to talk a little bit about, where would you consider your company in terms of baby, adolescent, adult? Where are you in the spectrum of really like being sustainable?
I mean, I still consider us at a baby stage because we're still pretty far away from hitting break even. We started first by taking a small portion of our gameplay and doing that as a standalone game that didn't have like recurring revenue with it, to test the market on something. Again, these types of games that we're making generally are millions of dollars over many years. So like, it was just kind of our absurdity to be like, nah, we can do it on 400K, sure. You know, let's jump in and get going and make this happen, which has definitely impressed people we've been able to build. But, you know, that means we haven't had a lot of extra resources, and we haven't had a lot in terms of the marketing and biz dev aspects of it. It's been still almost all product. You know, it hasn't scaled to that real business point until recently. We've just got to the point where we like, okay, we have our entire product experience and the entire cycle of it. Now we can go out and really start, you know, pulling people up. So I mean, we grew our user base 150% last month, or from everything that had existed before that in terms of the product and our building that up. We're exploring instead pushing into schools. We've been focusing on consumers so far as kind of something that you can move the needle a lot faster on consumers than long. Schools just consider it business to business sales. That's going to take a long time. They generally buy one time a year, so really long sales cycles. And so starting to push into that and explore it, and have the possibility of being break even in the next, you know, 6 months or something like that, but it's just, you know, getting there, getting the resources to really put that plan into effect, and feeling confident starting to execute on the plan when you don't have the money.
Do you have a mentor?
Yes.
Are you allowed to say who your mentor is?
I mean, well, I have Darren Cook, who's
Okay,
our lead
yeah.
angel investor, Dan Rua as well,
Uh-huh.
and I mean, many people that I talk with, on a regular basis.
Okay. Tell me, give me a couple highs and a couple lows during this whole entrepreneurial run of your company.
You definitely feel very scattered, and I mean, you can be perfectly thrilled with something early in the day and rock bottom later in the day about things, just depending on, like, I feel comfortable personally when I feel like, okay, I have my opportunities laid out for my plan. Our path could go in one of 20 directions, but I at least feel comfortable that I have these and I have a lot of options, and if these fall off the table, and so it's a lot of that for me, just making sure that I have these laid out and I have these options, and as Darren puts it, like, you want to have a loaded chessboard because he's a chess person,
right,
and stuff, and have that understanding, and then feel just confident that you can go execute it on at the same point. But I mean, it's definitely when you're on limited runway and you run an experiment and you make a partnership with someone, they're like, oh yeah, this happened recently, we're pretty sure you group buy with us, we're going to get you 500 people easy, we're going to hit 500 new users, and it was 63 and stuff like that, and it was their first group buy, they got optimistic. I didn't think we were going to hit quite there, but I was hoping we get close, and so it's just that constant experimental cycle, and I guess it's just, it wouldn't matter so much if I had, a year in the bank, but most, I think there's stats that 50% of startups should only have like 4 months or so in the bank, or less, and everyone's kind of running against the cliff all the time and executing on plans and experimenting, and sometimes like the VCs and stuff that you're talking with are like, oh, well, why don't you run this experiment? And I'm like, well, because that would cost 25% of the money I have in the bank to run that experiment, and so it's this trying to figure out how do you move the needle in the scrappiest way, or is that risk appropriate, and balancing that all the time, that when you have 12 people depending on you as well is very stressful. So hopefully that answered that question to an extent, to explain it. Maybe that was more about the stress than the highs, but I mean, the highs are definitely just accomplishing and building this incredible thing, and every time a kid messages us with their own feedback or comments, or mom says I gave them free time and they want nothing more than to play this game, or we give office tours and they come in and start freaking out because they recognize like the stuffed animal in our office from the game, and everything they're learning. And
so one of the things I've poorly set up is, what does the game do?
Right. So Kyle touched on that a bit. So we have Taito Online, which it's basically World of Warcraft, but for learning. So I, as a student, create a character, and I jump in the game world and start exploring and doing different quests, unlocking creative sandboxes. So our first module we put out was ecology. So students collect poop to DNA sample it to make food webs, solve problems about if things are invasive species, and just jump in and do all sorts of things in the game. So it's very much poised around active hands-on learning, inquiry-based science that are really proven to have strong efficacy. It's the best learning theory that we have, basically, we can do in video games at scale, which is just incredible. And so as they're doing that, they're unlocking the ability to do sandboxes, like building their own ecosystem. The module we're putting in right now is heredity, so they're doing Punnett squares, if you remember this back to your middle school science, and solving genetic problems, and oh my gosh, why are the flowers pink instead of yellow? This one character is really mad about that. Solve all these problems and actually breed your own dragon-like creatures. And so we've spent a lot of time developing the tools and infrastructure so we can scale up our content a lot faster now, and build now a module in about 3 to 4 months instead of the 1.5 years of base development of kind of the game and systems and all of that. And yeah, so we're really excited about that, and talking with partners about content and just kind of the speed and flexibility that we can build and organize that now is really cool.
So naively, because I haven't seen the game, but
it's okay.
Are you building other games, or are you building platforms within the same game?
One game. So the goal here is, when I was a gamer, I had these awesome franchise experiences, right? I played World of Warcraft for 4 years straight, and people have been playing it for a decade, or more at this point. And that's the type of experience you often get in these franchises. But in educational games, because of the fact that they're those fragmented one-off games, they're having to try to reacquire a customer, resell them an app or something like that, and then lose them, and reacquire them and lose them. And it's crappy for the business because they're just constantly reacquiring that customer, and there's a lot of lost revenue opportunities. But it's also not great for the user because they're not able to get led to the next hardest level of content or more opportunities. And so the idea that we can instead put this all in one environment and deliver this content and work with partners, and kids can stumble across new exciting things they never would have sought out, maybe physics and stuff, but because it's in this context they can do that. And I can embed cool research parts to improve their lives, like logging what they're thankful for, which makes people happier, so there's just so much we can do if we can pull them into this. We do plan on making that to more of a true platform in the future where other people can use our tools and build onto it, but gotta build your base first.
Right, very cool. Well, that's exciting. So one of the things that I often talk about are companies don't exist without the employees. So you can have the best idea in the world, and if you don't create the right team around you. So I want to talk a little bit about that, because we have a lot of very young entrepreneurs in here, and they're either flying by themselves or looking at hiring people and partnerships and different kinds of things that we've heard about with other startups. So take me through a little bit about your company culture and how, do you still use Eva Del Rio, or you just bought her material? Because she's one of the best HR people out there.
Yeah, I mean, we're mainly just friends.
Okay, she's
Ryan
awesome.
does a lot of that with us.
So tell me a little bit about your company culture and how you've built the team.
We have just a very open, direct, kind of progressive culture, I think, around the board. We were very intentional about that in the beginning. I mean, before we even had a team outside of some co-founders, I did sit down and think about what we wanted our values to be, and and got that written down around being bold, not having a bunch of pretense, that kind of that fakeness. I'm trying not to use bad words here in terms of what the actual value is, but going through that and making sure that everyone just felt completely included and comfortable in this environment. And yeah, I mean, I think we've definitely hit that. Our team's just absolutely phenomenal, and we try not to say it's a family because that's so cheesy and everything, but I mean, that's definitely how I feel, although as their boss, other people might not feel exactly that way about me in return. But I mean, it's definitely the type where I like to say nothing is sacred. Everyone can question anything, and they can tell me I'm wrong, and we can have those dialogue, and everyone's very open, and they understand where our runway is, what our business opportunities are. We do full team meetings every 2 weeks where I run through all of that with them, share them the same information that I share the board and everything. I mean, I mean, obviously those discussions are private from the board, but making sure that everybody has openness and is aware of everything. And I think that's the only way to just do the early stage startup that respects other people's agency and the other options they're giving up to work with you and your team as well, is to be that way. Okay.
Where do you see your company in 5 years? Company-wise, employee-wise, location-wise? You don't have to say revenue-wise, but where honestly, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself 5 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, I see us as having, at that point, what I first think about is what we'll have accomplished in terms of, we'll definitely be in quite a few schools and consumers, have the platform launch to the extent that one of our revenue streams is third parties adding their content and reaching children and having just a wealth of activities where you can jump in the game and learn tons across 9-year-olds and up. Lots, not everything yet, that's more of a 10-year goal, but a lot of stuff that you can jump in and learn through that process. And so for talented development in video games, we'll definitely need another location in addition to Gainesville, probably in Seattle or somewhere like that, because there's just a big concentration of game developers there, which we're not going to be able to scale too much bigger here from the game development side of the talent that we need. And so probably in the range of 200 or so employees at that point. Scaling that up, continuing localization, getting international will be important at that point, at the very least. If we haven't done it sooner than that, there's definitely a lot of opportunities to scale up, even just in English when it's education, because most people are also learning English internationally, and building up from there. And hopefully the culture will stay as much the same as it can. I get kind of worried when I read about big companies and how their cultures have fragmented, but that definitely comes from the top, and that's nothing that would ever be acceptable with us.
Well, as Darren Cook is your mentor, he has a great company, as you know, and a great culture there. So one of the things that Startup Talks does is showcases Gainesville's great tech community. So this is my last question, and we're going to open it up. what are some of the values that keep you in Gainesville? What are the great things that Gainesville keeps you here?
Yeah. Quite honest, the first one is the low cost of living
Okay.
in the burn. You know, we're doing something that, as I said, most people tackling a project like this raise
That's not a
millions of dollars
negative.
for. You said values, and I don't really consider like low expenses to be a value, but that is one of the primary reasons we're here. So, I mean, yeah, the fact that we have
That's very different than low wages.
That's true.
You know,
It's
low cost of living is a great value because the quality of life here is phenomenal.
And there have been times that people on our team have been offered jobs making more money in other markets, and when we ran it through cost of living calculators, it was like, you're going to struggle there a lot more than you struggle here. You know, you can manage okay on our salary, but making twice as much in New York City, you can't, you can't do that.
Right.
And so that has definitely been important for people in weighing those options. And, sometimes the offer is better elsewhere, and we'll tell them that, and we've had a lot of young college students through, so we're very open and honest and help them kind of analyze some of those results. And we've told people to leave, or we've suggested that they stay for various reasons and everything. So that's been really great. I mean, obviously the community here, for a small town, given that we have the University of Florida, it's very progressive for our team. It has a lot more culture than a lot of small towns have, and which is definitely really important for our team. We have a very diverse team kind of across the board, and I think in many towns of this size, they wouldn't find as much that resonated with them. And I'm excited about even more, like with the Cade Museum update soon. They're gonna. I've been pushing, and they promised me they're going to have some adult cool science classes like the Exploratorium in San Francisco does and stuff like that. And so opening up more of those cool opportunities so that there is interesting stuff to do in Gainesville will definitely help. And I mean, obviously we have great talent at the University of Florida, but for us, because of the video game side, as I mentioned to you earlier, it can be a little more challenging because they don't necessarily explicitly teach game development there for the most part. And so yeah, I guess the other biggest draw in Gainesville for us has been Career Source here and the work they do. They have various grants at different times, like the STEM Ready grant, which just closed up applicants, so don't get too excited, where they actually pay people to work 480 hours in an internship full-time, just pay them a salary to work with you to help people get into STEM careers. But being able to start people that way also meant that we were able to stretch our money and hire more people than we planned on being able to because of that, and has allowed resources, and we have over a 90% placement rate. That was our goal. Once people went through that program, they would be able to get placed in STEM careers if they had struggled to get employed. And so, I mean, almost everyone that's gone through ours has found employment afterwards, either with us or elsewhere. And so, I mean, the benefit to them, because video game industry is very hard to get into, has been great. And then we've been able to build a lot more than we would have been able to build otherwise because of those resources. And those are things that places that have more other money, like in Silicon Valley, you don't have those programs either, so it's kind of an interesting balance of what we can pull off here. And I don't think we would have been able to build, we would have been out of money a long time ago, if we were in another location trying to scrap together this really cool, progressive video game system that took some time and a decent sized team to build. Like, we wouldn't have had that team over there.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lindsey. Let's take some questions real quick from the folks who are here today. I know you're...
Hopefully I didn't stress you guys out too much about starting a company.
Again, not to bring finance too much into it,
but we are.
It is a core part of it, yeah. Because you talked about haven't been broken even yet, and you're an extremely lean model, and having to focus on like lower salaries and stuff like that. How do you keep a team of 12 people so motivated and so driven based on that vision without, with understanding the financial structure of how the business is going?
I mean, I think it is just making sure that they understand all of those opportunities and what you have. I mean, I literally have a table during our team meetings where I'll walk through, like, here's the funders I'm talking to, here's what we're talking about, here's what's going on. They know as it's happening and they understand that. And our people in particular, because we are mission driven. I mean, we are making a video game that will change lives for, people that play it. That's definitely an important part, and I think it's a lot harder if you don't have a mission, which is why I think there's a lot of jokes about every startup in Silicon Valley saying they're going to change the world, even if it's bullcrap, and stuff. But in our case, I'm like, we really are going to change the world, and our team believes that. And people who have tried to join but didn't believe that and just like wanted to do this as an opportunity to get their foot in the door didn't last. You know, it's only people that really believed in what we were creating and wanted that to exist in the world that's lasted with us.
Do some of your employees vest into the company?
Yeah, I mean, everyone that's a full-time employee has equity as well. I think being Gainesville, there was less of appreciation for that. Like, we had to explain what equity was to all of our team. Be like, it's important, guys. Hopefully we'll make you rich, I promise.
Right.
But we were also honest, or this could be worth nothing. Just you know, full disclosure. So, you know, I think we spent 2 hours one day when we first, like, set all that up with our team, like, explaining what equity was, what dilution was, what all these terms meant, how the math works out, running through all of that. So, like, you know, I think in the right communities in Gainesville, that's really valued, but for us, we just found people who really wanted to build what we're building, and we're passionate about that. And, you know, yes, they get excited when we mention, like, oh, look, guys, if we close at this rate, your stock's gonna be worth this now, you know, and that's cool, but, you know, none of our team, that's not the reason they're there, like, which I think is different than a lot of startups. But, yeah. Also, I wish I could say we were super lean, but 12 people at a small salary is still a significant burn.
So do you see yourself remaining private, going public, or being bought out?
Any of the above. I know that's like such a cop-out answer,
It
but
is.
I mean, my future investors might be watching this video right now.
No, I think it's a fair question. I mean, look, you have to have some driven goal, right? I mean, in your core, there's something saying, so the value to your employees, right? Say, this is where, I'm your leader. I'm heading you to this direction because there is, I know you're eating, you know, Campbell soups or whatever every night, or noodles or whatever it is.
They're eating out.
I know that, but I'm making a point that the value of, listen, my brother did several startups in Silicon Valley. They all failed, okay? But the dream was there, and he worked, you know, crazy hours, and he was completely bought in, and he was part of the team. Now, he understood the risk, and fortunately for him, he started his own company and did well. And so that's awesome. But he took those experiences of failure, quite honestly, that made him successful. And so,
I can give you the real answer, don't worry.
Huh?
I can give you the real answer.
Okay,
don't worry.
Because I think it's important. You're leading a team of people, and you're leading a great company. And listen, I've heard a lot about you. You are a rock star. I mean, people think you know, you're just, you know, whatever you touch is going to be successful, because if you can already tell by her personality, right? I mean, it's pretty simple to see you're on track to accomplish a mission, whatever that is. And so now the answer.
Yes. When I first started the company, I didn't want to ever sell. I was like, being acquired sounds terrible. I'm building this amazing company. That is what we will do. But I think, you know, since then, there's been a lot of shifts in both my perspective and the market itself. I mean, the first thing is that tech IPOs have been pretty bad. I mean, you know, and it seemed, I mean, Dell became a public company, you know, and kind of that driven market from the quarter-to-quarter basis, a lot of people really aren't enjoying, and it seems like less tech startups are IPOing, the numbers are way down, so that is just legitimately becoming less of a serious option because of the expectations. It used to be much smaller companies IPO, that doesn't really happen anymore. So like, that is legitimate option, is like moonshot of moonshots at this point. So the more realistic options are, of course, acquisition, and as I said, I used to be very much against that when I first started, you know, just that young passion that I'm going to get it. And then I was talking to a founder who had her company acquired, was like, it's great, now I get to spend 90% of my time in product development and just making our customers happy and building all this out, and I don't have to worry about any of that other crap. And I was like, oh, right. That could be really beautiful. So particularly though for me, because of the mission, it is about the reach. And so, you know, we've talked with some of the bigger companies that we've had intros to at various points, and it's like, the scale at which you could reach if you partnered with one of them, if they decided to literally, you know, obviously we're talking about potential partner or investment in the future, but like, if they did decide, well, I want to make this part of us, I mean, it can just blow up to an extent that would take us forever to do. And when I just think about the actual impact I want to have, like that could be the could be the best way to have that impact, you know, cash out the employees that put all this into it, and our investors who need that return, and then actually make a much bigger impact that potentially I could even reach, because they're already there and they have access to every child in the world already, you know, I mean, essentially some of these companies. And so that has definitely become much more appealing, just as I've better understood, I guess, business and how this works, and just who the beasts are of business that have that reach, and how that compares to what it would take me to try to get there one day. And then, you know, I am interested in some of the models people are doing if that doesn't happen, in terms of private buybacks and things like that, and, you know, bringing investors in that cash out your early employees and investors and some of those
Right.
creative things people are doing because people aren't going public anymore.
Right.
So I'm very interested in how the market is getting much more creative
Right.
about that, and that might be over the head of people if you're not like super like financially people on how that is, but
No, I think it expresses the dream.
yeah, I mean, basically like Unity, we use the Unreal game engine. Unity is a different game engine. I mean, they recently raised $200 million or something, and I think about half of that actually was just investors
Wow.
buying the stock from the early employees and founders so that they could cash out without the company going public
Right.
or anything. And so it's kind of this weird financial shifting down the line further and further of everyone trying to grow the company and make money down there.
Right.
But I think it's an interesting potential model to get people
Yeah.
returns and not deal with really being a public company.
Understood, yeah. Yes, sir. Yep.
Oh, me.
Yep.
All right. Could you talk more about your experience with the Intel Accelerator, the positives and the negatives?
Yeah, I mean, it was absolutely awesome. I think we may have been a bit early to take advantage of it, particularly because we were definitely focusing on consumers first, but we still have those relationships. So as they have a lot of school reach, that 'cause they sell computers into schools, doing an accelerator with a corporation is very, very different than doing an accelerator just with 500 startups or YC or someone like that. I mean, they're looking for return for them and what opportunities they can have in there as well, how they can partner with you. And so, which I think is a great opportunity though, if you have that in mind and can figure that out. And one or two of the companies that went into the accelerator were a bit further along, had raised a Series A or about to raise a Series A, and they were, they knew that going in and they took advantage of it, and I mean, had tons of meetings very quickly, and it took me about a month of being there to be like, oh, this is how corporate partnerships work. Okay, now I understand this. That's not my background, and then really start. But it's definitely opened up really interesting doors, like devices and approaches from the tech side that we didn't realize existed, that can enable like low connectivity versions of our game, maybe in rural America where they can't stream an online game, and we didn't know these existed, and so we've talked with partners at Intel that have set things up. They're benchmarking it for us and gave us some tech to test things on, and so that opens up a whole new line of opportunities, and some of those you can sell through them if they know who's buying those devices. And so yeah, I mean, accelerators in general, are great if they can bring you enough value. I mean, even people who have accelerators with no real proven value or partners are trying to take 6%, and I think that's a little ridiculous sometimes. But I mean, a corporate partner accelerator is just a very, very different experience than the regular ones, and definitely worthwhile if there's a reason you want to do that.
Cool. Yeah. One more question. Anybody? Yes, sir.
So could you speak a little bit about the makeup, composition of your team?
Yeah, so our co-founders are 2 men and 2 women, and our team overall, as I mentioned, is pretty diverse. We're about 42% female. I do kind of the breakdowns by like our core team we pay versus the interns, which depending on who STEM-ready approves, I don't necessarily have control of. But in terms of like our core team, almost 50% female on that end. We actually we're like 20 to 25% LGBTQ, which has been a really great community for us. Just when you start diverse, it's a lot easier to have that inclusion and that diverse community and support each other. And it's definitely been to the extent where there's been some people who have come into the company who, for internships or whatever, who didn't catch on to our culture very much. So Ryan now, our HR guy, will just tell people up front, like, hey, if you have if you're going to say stuff in our company that is going to, like one person was like, oh, we debate issues? That's really cool. And he's like, no, because this is people's lives. We don't debate issues about, gay marriage or something. We discuss the struggles people experience in their everyday lives, but this is not an intellectual debate. And so it's definitely been interesting just making sure the expectations have been set right, that like, yeah, there's not a really bad situation for someone coming in and just being a terrible fit, because of the fact that we are definitely so diverse up front with our team, and then representation across the board there, including for minorities, although we do have less from the underrepresented categories, which in tech, like if you're if you're international from Asia somewhere, you don't count as underrepresented and
Right,
stuff. So
right.
Doing all those, I have a spreadsheet that Ryan gets mad at me about, but when you go to corporate funders like Intel, they want to know your numbers, and then he thinks it's terrible that I put everyone in boxes, but I have to get the numbers, man.
Yeah.
But overall, I guess just what I would like to say about that is definitely starting with a diverse team makes it a lot easier as you keep going. If you're pulling in somebody and you have a very core starter team that even are all men or all white or something, and you start pulling people in, that's great. If you get to 20, 30 people and there's absolutely no diversity, people are going to be terrified to join that team and understand what type of culture you have there. And so we've had a lot of value out of that. I might talk too long on this, sorry, I don't know what our time. We've had a lot of value out of that.
62 more seconds.
Because of the perspectives that people do bring to it. And we set up our characters. You don't choose, are you a boy or a girl? You just choose a body style, and they're not assigned genders. And it's something that, people that don't worry about those issues don't really notice, but I have actually had a teenager thank me for already when we were at an event, that for people that are part of the LGBTQ community, that is meaningful. And there's a lot of things like that developing the game, we probably wouldn't have figured out. I just would have been oblivious and just designed it how everyone tends to do games. And later on in 5 years, we would have realized that a big group of people felt really put out by that and didn't feel included. And so there's just been tons of examples like that of just how much. And I know that, I'm just kind of going off your question here because I just want to make sure to make a point. I know that a lot of people feel like diversity is just being praised for diversity's sake, but businesses that have females on the board make more revenues. Businesses that have more diversity can serve more people, and we've seen awesome impacts already and already are having, even from our small user base so far, be appreciative of the efforts we've made in that area, and it definitely speaks to them. And it's not something I would have been aware of if we didn't have a team that brought all these different values to the table.
Well, Lindsey, I want to thank you for coming in today. Let's give you a big round of applause.